Hello again, Cody Johnson here at Trendless Designs in Grand Forks, North Dakota. Just had the opportunity to look at some fiberglass parts, and we have a lot of requests for body kits and things of that nature. But we had kind of a collision job come in with this R33 GTR. It's not a factory kit. It's kind of aftermarket in some aspects, but it's a Nismo kit. But it is still fiberglass. There are some things that are different. There is a little bit better quality in the Nismo stuff that you might find in a lot of the aftermarket body kits and things of that nature. So we're just gonna point out some of those differences. First thing I wanted to talk about was just kind of how fiberglass, FRP, SMC, they kind of all fall along the same lines, how it acts when it gets bumped or impacted. It doesn't act like plastic. Plastic will rebound. Depending on the paint that's on there, the paint might flex with it if it was done well. If it wasn't, the paint might crack, but the part may not. So FRP, SMC, and fiberglass, they all kind of get used interchangeably. Sometimes there's a little bit different characteristics. Fiberglass is in SMC and FRP. Fiberglass strands are what gives the two products its strength. Most of the body kits are made out of FRP, fiber reinforced plastic. SMC is more what you would see on a factory vehicle. A lot of the composite box sides on pickups and stuff like that is SMC. So it's basically kind of made like a steel part. It's got a die that's pressed together. So the quality level is pretty high on that. Fiberglass or FRP parts are either hand laid or they're sprayed into a die. So we end up with things in that stuff that we have to fix before we can get to the paint part of it. You can't just pull it out of the box and paint it and hope it looks well. There's voids in it, there could be small cracks, things of that nature. Just to kind of show you what happened with these parts, when they get bumped, it cracks, it does not rebound. The material itself cracks, not just the paint. It doesn't take much of an impact for this to actually happen. It's very rigid, so when it hits something, there's a good chance that you're gonna end up with cracks, not just in the impact site, but also in high stress areas like this corner here. Another thing that we see in these parts is that they're not very straight. They typically come in a white or a black primer, so you can't really see it out of the box. But if you get paint on it, you will see that there are waves and things of that nature in it. Depending on the vehicle that this is going on, the waves and stuff might not be a big deal. If it's going on to something that may get damaged easily, like a drift car or something like that, we might just overlook those things and just get paint on it for the vehicle so it looks good from a distance. But if it's something you want to use on the street and you want it to look good, it does require quite a bit of work to get it looking nice. On the repair side of things, we can't just fix this on one side. If you want this to be a strong repair, we have to fix both sides of the damages like we did on this bumper here. If we come to the back side here, you can kind of see the area that we repaired the inside of that. Once that is cured and rigid again, we come back to the front side, do another repair, and then finish that off with some sort of a body filler, and of course into a primer surfacer before paint. So it does get to be kind of time consuming to repair these. Again, this isn't just something that we can find anywhere. They're not easy to get a hold of, so in this case it made sense to repair this. The customer did end up buying a new lower lip for this, so we didn't have to fix any of that. And that gave us the opportunity to talk about a couple of different products and the differences that we see in those. So if we come over here, you can see that the new part, again, this is a Nismo part, so it's about as high a quality as we're gonna see in a fiberglass part. If you look closely, pay attention to all around the edges, you're gonna see that it looks pretty similar to any other factory part. It's got dimples and holes where the mounting points are. So there's not a whole lot of pre-fitting or anything that needs to be done with this part. We have gone back to the center of this one and straightened it out. We had to do some sanding and did some filler work with that so that we don't have the waves in there like it did from when it was sold off the lot. So if we come over and we look at this part, this is an aftermarket body kit. You can see that the material's a little bit thinner. The edges and stuff don't have any holes or dimples or anything of that nature. No real way to attach it, so these need to be pre-mounted before we even start working on them. If you come in close here, you can kind of see between this part and that part over there, the difference in the primer that's on here. This typically is some sort of a gel coat, and the gel coat does a good job of bridging over any imperfections in the fiberglass itself. There's a lot of pinholes, like micro cracking and stuff like that, as well as the texture of the fibers themselves. And the gel coat does a good job of bridging over that. The problem with a lot of these parts is that, again, they're not perfectly straight. A lot of them have dirt nibs and runs and things like that in the primer. So we have to go back and sand this. And when we sand this, more often than not, we break through that and we expose pinholes, some of that stuff that's underneath. So after these parts are pre-mounted to the vehicle, we will then prep them and spray them in a higher build primer surfacer. That surfacer will then show us whatever is left behind, any pinholes or anything like that. We'll be able to see them very easy and we can go back and fix them at that point. The surfacer itself will fix some of the very small minor stuff, but it's not going to take care of anything major. We'll have to go back and fill those after we can see them. So it might be a little bit easier actually to come over here and see. If we look at this factory part, this has been painted, it came off the vehicle. This white part here is the gel coat that is on top of the actual fiberglass material. We can see how thick that is based on how far it feathered out before it got to the next product. After that, there's a primer of some sorts. It's a little bit thinner. And then we have our color and our clear coat on top of that. So you can kind of see between this part that is a Nismo part and the aftermarket body kit part where there's less primer material on there, which creates a little bit more work for us. So again, there's a lot of different ways to look at this. If you're looking at like a KBD kit where there's plastic versus fiberglass, there's some things you want to take into account. Again, the biggest thing is, what are you going to use the car for? If you're using the car on the street, you're going to be very careful with it. There's nothing wrong with fiberglass. It's going to require some work to get it looking nice and straight, but the other option being a plastic part like a KBD kit, you're going to get the flexibility and the strength and durability of like an OEM bumper. But again, there's a cost that comes with that, as well as possibly weight and some other things. So if you're debating kind of whether or not to spend 3 times the amount of money for a fiberglass kit or just find the cheaper kit, there's kind of a wash in the end. The new parts, this is a Nismo part again, that is very nice. Even this is going to require a coat of surfacer before we go to paint on it to make sure it's going to be straight without pinholes. So the process is basically the same, but there's a lot of time that goes into the mounting portion, pre-mounting portion of the aftermarket kits that can add up pretty quickly and cost quite a bit over time, depending on the vehicle. Sometimes we have to build brackets and stuff to mount them because they won't have the same mounting points. Fiberglass, as you can kind of see again, we talked about where the high stress points are on the vehicle and on the part just inherently due to its design. We want to try to avoid that when we mount these. This one again is designed to mount just like the factory bumper is. So there's going to be parts where there's hardware and stuff in it. A lot of these kits come with rivets or screws. Anytime you put a rivet or a screw through fiberglass, you've created a high stress point. It's going to crack from there. So if you're spending a lot of money to have these installed, and then you go back and you put screws or rivets in them, you're probably going to ruin all the work that's gone into it up to that point. So what we typically do, if we have parts that aren't designed for double stick tape, we use a lot of windshield urethane to attach these parts, which gives them just enough flexibility and to not crack, but also it holds on really well and it'll take a little bit of a bump or whatever. More of a bump than the fiberglass itself will. So depending on which way you decide to go, it could be a wash in the end. You could spend more money on the part and have it set up so that it's ready to mount to the vehicle and pay a premium for it, or you could spend considerably less on a part and then have us or some other company get that mounted and prep for paint. Just to give you an idea on price, this Nismo part, we don't know a customer bought it, but there's a good chance that this part alone, just this lip, costs as much, if not more, than an entire body kit from another company. So it's kind of something that you need to weigh for yourself. Maybe talk to the shop that you're gonna have doing it ahead of time before you buy anything, just so you can kind of get an estimate on what something like that might cost. So hopefully that clears up some questions. If you have more questions, just send out a message or make a comment and we'll address those as they come.